You're listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me today are Jeff Ranke and Andy Zoll, the editors of Manufacturing.net, Design and Development Today, and IEN.com. We each have about 15 years of experience covering the industry. Each week, we take the 5 most popular stories on the websites and discuss the implications they might have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also do us a big favor by leaving a podcast a positive review. Finally, if you want to reach any of us, you can reach us at Jeff, Andy, or David at IEN.com. All right. Solid opening, guys. Solid opening.
I thought for sure if you're going to make any mistake, you'd have called Indiana.
Oh, yeah, no. No. It was earlier than that.
Yeah, you got past that.
That part went
Good
well.
work.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, Anna's unable to join us today. Andy, you're pitching in short notice. Really appreciate it.
Anytime, as always.
You have a stack of notes from just being notified like hours ago that you were going to do this. It's great.
They're mostly your notes that I printed out. But It's a big stack of them, but it looks like I did a lot of work. So
You need to learn. You take credit for everything.
Yeah,
You do
yeah.
not give credit. That isn't what we do here.
The prep is there. The prep
It's
is
not
there.
the culture.
I mean, I did hit the print button, so
Yeah.
You own it.
Somewhere the tree's crying. All right. Before we get started, I wanted to do a special shout out to Jordan at the team at PBZ. Thank you very much for the kind words. And for everyone, please keep sending us, your feedback regarding the podcast. We really appreciate it. Helps us improve it as we go forward. We also have a couple more Today in Manufacturing t-shirts. So if you're interested in one of those, please email any one of us with email the podcast in the subject line, and we'll shoot one of those out to you. We're just really enjoying spending money on postage.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Let's jump into our first story this week. Our first story this week is NTSB has said poor planning led to deadly Texas pipeline blast. On August 21st, 2020, in Corpus Christi Ship Channel in Texas, the dredging vessel Wayman L. Boyd's rotating cutter head cut the 16-inch pipeline owned by Enterprise Products. The cut released a geyser of propane that exploded around the vessel and killed 5 people. The National Transportation Safety Board has determined that the accident likely happened as a result of inadequate communication, planning, and risk management by the operator, Orion Marine Group. 4 crew members were killed. 1 employee died aboard an adjacent barge. The Wayman L. Boyd was a total loss, valued at almost $9.5 million. While the explosion caused more than $2 million in damage to the Enterprise Products pipeline. According to the NTSB, the dredge operators did not realize how close they were to the pipeline, and dredging plans provided by Schneider Engineering and Consulting were deficient. The NTSB recommended that everyone involved in the explosion implement and update their policies and procedures for dredging near pipelines. And Andy, after a deadly disaster with more than $11 million worth of damage, it seemed odd to me that there was just a recommendation.
you would hope that there would be more of an enforcement angle to this investigation. Now, whether OSHA or the Justice Department or even Texas authorities are looking into this, you would hope they would, and there would be some ramifications, because there seems to me, I am not an attorney, but it seems like there's obvious negligence here. I mean, as I read this, the engineering firm provided bad information to the dredging company, which meant that its preparation, as far as where it was going to dredge, wasn't right to begin with. So there's carelessness in these types of accidents, and this one happened before anyone went out on the water that day. So you would hope someone would eventually be held responsible in addition to implementing these kinds of recommendations.
Now, according to the Caller Times, this company is facing multiple, or all the companies involved are facing lawsuits. Some of them are facing multiple lawsuits. One worker, Jose Cantu, worked on the vessel, is seeking more than $100 million in damages, with everyone involved listed as a defendant. Lucio Silva is suing Orion Marine Construction for another $100 million in damages. And there are 4 additional lawsuits that have been filed against Orion. 3 are seeking $50 million apiece. 1 is seeking 10. Now, Jeff, based on the negligence, this could be a very costly accident.
It should be.
Yeah.
It should be an extremely costly accident. And there's a couple of different things here. So first of all, if you've ever read an NTSB report or an OSHA report or a Chemical Safety Board report, any of which would potentially apply here, they're extremely well done. They're extremely thorough, and they really point out not only what happened, but what should have happened and what didn't happen. Now, that's great. But in the process of 14 months, which was from the time this happened to the time the report came out, the loss of 4 lives, you've got a government agency that basically did nothing but produce a really nice report. That is pathetic.
Yeah.
That is absolutely the weakest response that could possibly come out of this whole situation. And the other thing is, you talked about the engineering firm. That's the sister company of Orion Maritime. So they're all interwoven here. They all screwed up. They were all wrong and negligent. And just like the headline says, poor planning, deadly results. It's absolutely ridiculous that all that comes out of this are recommendations to be better next time, which allows these companies to essentially, although they're going to face some lawsuits and there's going to be some mitigation here, basically they can come out of this saying stuff like, we're going to cooperate with the regulators, improve our safety program. We share the NTSB's objective in preventing similar accidents in the future. Great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Here's the other thing that really almost made my stomach turn. Looking at some of the things that Orion is trying to sort of hide behind from a legal perspective, they're pointing to the Limitation of Liability Act of 1851.
Recent.
It's a maritime law that allows offshore companies to limit victims' compensation to the value of the vessel they served on. That's $9.5 million is what this boat was valued at. Now, it doesn't specify whether that's per victim or total.
Yeah.
Either way, you're looking at the only thing that's going to come out of this is a potential civil lawsuit. The other thing, because of when this occurred, is everybody who is going to sue this company had to do so by February of this year. Now, that seems like a reasonable amount of time, except when you look at the government report that basically came out and showed how wrong Orion was in every way, shape, and form. It didn't come out till December.
It came out now, yeah.
So basically, you had all this time, these 8 months, where you really didn't know what was going on. And now, because the statute has passed in terms of the Limitation of Liability Act that Orion is sort of trying to enforce here or put forward as the governance for all of this, there may be people out there who had a right to seek compensation, who had a right to, even beyond the compensation, just hold this company accountable for the horrible incident that they created.
Yeah, well, and I didn't even, at first, when you mentioned the deadline in February, I mean, that's only, 6 months after the accident? I mean, we talk about this a lot, where a lot of these people are probably still recovering from injuries. And meanwhile, they got to try and figure out how they're going to litigate this.
Exactly. And at the meantime, there's probably difficulties. I mean, it can't be a real friendly work environment, right? If you were on that boat and you've got the company basically saying, hey, you're not going to sue us or anything. All right? I mean, we're cool, right? So how do you manage your job there, not knowing what you're going to do, not knowing exactly who is accountable until you see this report 8 months after the fact, or 14 months after the actual incident? All of these things are just extremely frustrating to me because you've got government resources on site ready to go, and then you've also got these legal roadblocks that are just preventing not only restitution, but also just accountability, which is the bigger thing for me.
Yeah. It really reminded me of the story that we covered back about 20 weeks ago. If you remember the story of the natural blaze in San Francisco, which was blamed on operator error because he started, he was working with Kilford Engineering and he was digging that trench for fiber optic cable and he accidentally hit the gas pipe. And it was kind of all attributed to the same thing: bad planning, bad plans. And it's just, as we go to digitize everything, it kind of made me think about how we need to do a better job of mapping this stuff out. I don't know. I feel like the tools are there for accidents like this to still happen. I mean, I don't know. It just shows, poor planning and negligence.
Like a lot of things we talk about here, there's needs to be more emphasis on the front end of actually doing your homework. And I'm curious as to whether those recommendations they issued went into maybe updating this country's maritime laws, because I feel like this has come up before where a lot of those are very, like a lot of laws, they're very archaic and they just haven't been updated to account for the scale of both boat traffic and modern economics, basically.
Well, and it's not to say that the court is going to adhere to that and that's what they're going to use in terms of going forward, but man, that is a crappy tactic to pull out and try to use to basically get out of being accountable for what you did wrong here.
Yeah, we're going to defend ourselves with a 170-year-old law.
Yeah.
That's a hard one to stomach. All right. Our next most popular story. 5G threatens aircraft instruments. The new 5G network is set to launch in January. However, months ago, the FAA began expressing concern over whether the 5G network could affect vital navigation and safety instruments on aircraft. This week, the Wall Street Journal reported that the FAA would limit pilots' use of automatic landing systems and other cockpit technology of more than 6,000 airliners and other aircraft. The systems rely on altimeters, which measure an aircraft's distance from the ground. The new Spectrum band could potentially interfere with radio altimeters. Telecom companies say the new network poses no risk to flight safety, but have still limited the power of some 5G base stations. The aviation sector says it could wreak havoc on air travel and stop planes from flying at night or in any conditions in which pilots can't see the runway. Jeff, this is just not an industry that can take another hard loss.
No, and it's just such a weird convergence of different markets and different factors. And just to sidestep from that a little bit, isn't this basically what happened in Die Hard 2?
Yeah.
Didn't they tell the planes like they were ready, they were closer to or further away or something? They did something to mess with the landing and they crashed and horrible things.
I mean, yeah, that airport in particular was hijacked by terrorists, but similar scenario.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I don't think in any way, shape, or form do I want something being limited in terms of helping to land a plane full of people. We should definitely avoid that.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy because you've got the 5G stuff, which has been the impact of tens of billions of dollars of investment by these wireless companies. You've also got, on one hand, you've got those companies which, according to some of the stats I pulled up, wireless technology companies are seeing year over year increases in profit of like 30%. It's a huge, it's like a $5 trillion marketplace going up and up and up. On the other hand, you've got airlines and air travel down by about 25%. You've got these airlines losing basically like about $40 billion in total profit since COVID started. So you've got one spiraling, one shooting through the roof. So weird that these two different markets are sort of connected through this technology. I would certainly hope as we get into this further, I can use a slower network as opposed to an unsafe plane, especially after all that stuff with Boeing and the 737 MAXs and all the safety concerns there. So hopefully that does become the greater priority here. I think one thing is they said that they weren't sure yet. Right?
Yeah.
It's still sort of TBD in terms of the total impact. But I think when you do look at those, the other thing that's sort of in here as well is when you look at the infrastructure bill that was just signed, like $65 billion were allocated towards broadband improvements, which doesn't specifically call out 5G, but that's the thought. That's the strategy behind that. So just a lot of weird competing elements here with this.
Andy, I wanted to get your take because not only did you work on this story, but you also have past working in the wireless industry, covering the wireless industry for years. So, what is your take on this story? Is this a real threat to aviation? And is it to the fact that 5G and telecom is so strong right now and airlines are so down that maybe they just have the upper hand in terms of what's going to happen?
It's not so much that, it's just kind of really emphasizes the fight over a limited resource. So all our communications, wireless communications, travel over the radio electromagnetic spectrum. And there's only so much of the band. And this is in the C band, what they're talking about here. And so when the FCC auctions this off, I mean, wireless companies pay billions of dollars for this.
Right.
And it's only certain sections are reserved for mobile. There's stuff for military and aviation here, obviously satellite, all the things that we use wireless communications for. And when these are, this is one of those instances where it just has to get resolved for both parties. Maybe not getting exactly what they want, but we have to have air travel and these companies paid billions of dollars. They have to have 5G communications. Like they have to hash this out. Now, other companies, when the wireless companies say it's safe, they're pointing to other companies that have opened up this band and it's been fine. But other companies other countries have taken steps to alleviate any potential concerns. They've limited that activity around airports specifically. So maybe that's something they come up with here as this it's basically a fight between these two different sectors over this very finite resource.
That's what I found most interesting is that, so the telecom companies come out and they're just like, no risk to flight safety, everything's fine. But just in case, we're still going to lower it. It's like, well, if everything's fine, why are we going to lower it?
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know. It's like you said, these are two industries that they're both going to have to figure it out in order to make it work, because it's not like either concession is going to be satisfactory.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like we can stop landing planes at night.
Well, that's the thing, especially they're talking about limiting flights.
Yeah.
I mean, and cutting back. That's the last thing the airline industry needs right now,
Yeah.
to be mandated in terms of when they can fly people.
Yeah.
That's,
And if I can't take that overnight red eye back from Vegas, like I'm not flying.
okay, but you never plan to take that.
Well, I mean, after a while,
Only half the people on that plane planned
the first
to take
time,
the red
the
eye.
first time I took that, I didn't plan it. But then I realized, like, oh, you know what? I just hang out all day, sleep on the plane, wake up in Madison or Chicago or Milwaukee, wherever I land, based on the poor planning. But yeah, no, it's. I mean, based in the Midwest, I mean, we would probably be severely limited as to when and how we could travel, just because we're either, you know, coming back on red eyes or leaving way early in the morning.
Absolutely. Either way this goes, can we call it the McLean resolution when this gets figured out? Is that too far?
I mean, it's not too far. I think that, but it's almost.
I'm excited. It's almost Christmas. That's like Die Hard movie season.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to also shed a little light on just the strain 5G has had before it's even been rolled out. Now, I just took the high points and the fires that 5G has had to put out so far. 5G has been blamed for causing, exacerbating, and spreading COVID. I mean, that's one we've all heard. Causing cancer, being used by China to spy on Americans, Bill Gates using 5G to brainwash us. It also kills birds, causes autism, damages trees and plants, and is being used to depopulate the planet.
Okay, why did you do this? Because now somebody is going to capture that and use it as like a valid argument and all of those things. According to David Manty and IEN.com, all of this stuff is now true.
But I should have said, like, in between each one, been like, but this is garbage. No, it's just, you know, they've had a lot of PR wars, you know, not rightfully so, but they've still had to like combat some of this idiocy out there. And this is one that actually deserves a little bit of attention.
Like
This
a
one
lot of
yes, it
things these days, this is a new technology that has not been properly explained to people who need things explained to them a lot.
Yeah. But
Wow, that was very, very politically correct.
Just
Andy.
trying to do my best out here.
Yeah.
Well done.
But they needed explained to them in like a dimly lit YouTube video with, you know, a lot of fast facts.
No, it needs to be like a chalkboard.
Oh, chalkboard. No, oh, I'm just saying what seems to be working.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or some sort of, you know, message board. Special numbers. All right. Our next most popular story. I really hope that is not used for evil. I feel bad about that
If
now.
you hadn't said that, they can just deep fake it now anyway. It's fine.
If they deep fake me, they're just troubling, waste of time. All right. Our next most popular story. Musk says job titles don't mean anything. Elon Musk participated in the Wall Street Journal's CEO Council Summit in Washington, D.C. During the interview, the moderator asked the Tesla and SpaceX exec whether he would consider stepping down as CEO or taking a lesser role. He changed the subject and said, titles don't mean anything anyways. Back on March 15th, Musk officially changed his title to Techno King. He also changed the CFO's title to Master of Coin, and this was in an SEC filing, and it was a joke. Musk said that there are 4 titles that mean anything for a company: president, secretary, treasurer, and director. And he says that they could all be the same person. Musk referenced the form entrepreneurs fill out when they're creating a C corporation. He says CEO, CFO, general counsel, all of them seem more like a marketing experiment. And the best part, Jeff, was that he said this to a room filled with CEOs at Wall Street Journal's CEO Council Summit.
Yeah.
Just like, you're all frauds.
What a fun guy to hang out with.
He is. He is
know?
a fun guy.
Yeah. So let's put Elon in a corner for a second. All right. And I'm just talking about what he said in terms of titles. Now, you and I, and Andy, I think to a lesser extent, we worked with somebody that was chasing a title.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to know exactly who I'm talking about.
There's
This person
several
was
somebodies.
chasing this title, wanted this title, finally got it, saw the other responsibilities that were connected with this title, and pretty much spiraled. It was a horrible thing to actually end up giving this person, even though they chased it for so long.
Right.
So titles, some people, it's a big deal. In that instance, chasing that title was a bad thing, but that title did mean something. In other situations, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I think most people, at the end of the day, they want autonomy in what they're doing, and they want to be well compensated for it.
Yeah.
I don't think most people care about the title.
Well, I think there are two types of people. There are people that care about the title, and then there are people that care about the body of work. And I'm also concerned because I have at least 5 people in my mind. I'm not certain which one you're talking about. However,
I will tell you when we're done.
okay, that sounds good. I'm sure that him or her. Damn.
Yeah, it is him. It is him or her.
Oh, okay.
You're dead on right there. They're not in this room.
But what bothers me, is that, so I get it. Like, and people know in the company whether or not that person is doing their job or whether or not they're valuable to that company. The only thing that I'm bothered by is even though these are, essentially fraudulent, once you attain that title, you're in that upper crust and you can be headhunted and you can be remarketed to and repackaged to other companies because we've seen toxic executives.
But you have to care about that.
Yeah, I know. But see, that's the thing is like there are people that don't care about that, but all the people working for that company, they care about it where they're just like, and so it bothers me sometimes when once you've attained the status of a CEO or CFO, sometimes that's all that matters. Whereas they don't look at the body of work where it's like, oh, you were like universally hated and your history of work here has shown like a bunch of failures. Yeah, well, we had a lot of bad apples there. A lot of bad apples. Andy, your take on the legitimacy of titles.
It's pretty obvious he's just trying to stir things up here and maybe distract from some other issues he may have going on at his respective companies. But I think it's worth maybe considering that we do place too much value on a title. And I'm as guilty of it as anybody. You're always, you feel better when you get a new position or what have you.
Yeah.
And it probably shouldn't be that way. It just because, if I declare myself senior executive vice president of Words or whatever, that that doesn't change my day to day. And so maybe just this is not going to change overnight or anything, but maybe we should just as a society maybe consider not placing as much emphasis on your title and maybe a little more on the work you're doing.
Well, and I think that I agree with you 100% there. And I think one of the reasons that he's definitely flexing a little bit here, and he can because he's got one company out of 4 that's actually publicly traded, right? Tesla is the only one that we really know about the financial inner workings, and it's doing extremely well. So he can get away with stuff like calling his CFO the master of coin. Now, if SpaceX or Boring or Neuralink wants to go public, guess what? If I'm a banker and I want to sit down and invest some money or an investment guy or whatever, I don't want to meet your master of coin. I want to meet the CFO.
Yeah.
I want to meet your CIO. I don't want all of this other cutesy stuff going on. So he can get away with that here, but that's because it's after the fact.
Yeah.
And he can talk about that. I think this was intentional. He does this stuff to just... he's looking for a bear to poke sometimes is what it feels like. He's searching for something to stand out as the sort of rebellious leader who's going to try to reshape the way we do things in corporate America. And
but
it's unnecessary.
Yeah, it's unnecessary, but there's always at least a kernel of truth in there that is what makes people laugh at first. Like, man, he's crazy. Man, that is really true though. Really true. Like I would actually love it as a thought experiment if we change your title to executive vice president of Words, like on LinkedIn, and just see how many pitches
I can do that when we're done here. Sure. Yeah.
Just like,
I feel like that's not the craziest thing I've seen on LinkedIn.
Oh, no. I mean, I poked at it like in this video, but with all the gurus and evangelists and strategists. And I mean, I always take a jab at consultants. But, oh, yeah, the ninjas. Everyone's like a word ninja.
Careful.
Just like,
Anna did want to be known for a short time as the B2B content ninja.
Well, so I would say
that's legitimate. That's excluded. That's a legitimate title.
Yeah, Anna's a
for
black
our purposes.
Belt. She's a black belt in that, right? Now, I would also highly encourage everyone to watch this interview because it covers some just fascinating points. And I would like to go through just a few of them that he covered. And I mean, it could dedicate an entire podcast on this 40-minute interview that he did. But he said that autonomy will mean more cars and traffic that will actually be on the streets. So he says that we're going to need like double-deckered freeways and to build tunnels in order to relieve some of this congestion. Now, people talked about flying cars, but he says he's not a big believer in flying cars, which I'm sorry, Anna's not here to just champion that, Not a big believer in flying cars. He says they're basically helicopters with wheels, and he raised another interesting point that I really kind of didn't think about, but he said people don't want the skies swarming with flying cars. And I mean, while it's cool to be in a flying car, but if the skies looked like the Beltline, that'd be a garbage view every day. Worse than ours already.
I mean, my house is in the flight pattern of the airport. It's already annoying. I can't even imagine having a little thing buzzing over every...
Right?
Yeah.
Just a bunch of quadcopters going back and forth.
How did he get on to like traffic patterns and flying cars from job titles?
Infrastructure bill. And actually, the infrastructure bill came up before, which leads into, he talked about the role of government, which made me...
This would be good.
Yeah, he said now, and Jeff, I think you'd find this one interesting, the role of government should be like a referee, not a player on the field. They need to get out of the way and not impede progress. He said rules and regulations increase every year. There's more every year, and it just gets harder to do things. Now, what I found interesting, and
is he running for state assemblyman now?
Well, no, but I mean, this would get him elected, right? This would get him elected.
I mean, I feel like I've heard that 100 times in my career.
But he says there's no effective garbage system for removing rules and regulations. So, which would be like, I mean, well, we just talked about this maritime law from 1851.
There's plenty of mechanisms. It's passing bills. It's not easy, but there's mechanisms.
Well, that's his issue with all this stuff. Like, there's a process, and you have to be patient, and you have to work through it. He just says, "This is what it is. Just do it."
He also he said that he takes a lot of heat because people say Tesla is worth so much because of the subsidies that the government created as a result of it. But he said that he's in favor of getting rid of all subsidies everywhere. Delete them all.
Well, of course he's going to say that.
Huh?
Because for EVs, his stuff is timed out for the most part.
Yeah.
Okay. So Tesla subsidies are almost gone, whereas we're going to talk about Lucid here in a little bit.
Yeah.
They're just coming on board. Yeah, he doesn't want Lucid buyers to get those subsidies. So that's a pretty easy thing for him to say.
Not
Picking
just
winners
EVs.
and losers now.
Yeah.
Not just EVs, all over.
Well, yeah, again, that's really, really easy to say when you're worth, $50 billion.
It is. There was definitely one part of the interview where he's like, "We can go longer if you want." And she's like, "Well, that's fine, but we have a specific amount of time. And, we have other people here to speak." And he kind of just looks at her like, "But it's me." Like, but I'm like, you got everyone in the room.
I am Iron Man.
Yeah, you've got like 2 through 50, but you're talking to number 1 right now. So number 1's going to talk until until he's done. 2 other things that, of course, were interesting, but because this one has to do with the labor shortage. They talked about the Tesla bots, and he talked about, using autopilot, which is in a Tesla, in a humanoid robot, using it as a substitute for human labor because he says there's not enough people. And now, at first I was like,
there's not enough people?
Oh yeah. No, okay. So this is, there's enough people right now, but he said one of the greatest risks to civilization is the low birth rate and the rapidly declining birth rate. If people don't have more children, civilization will crumble.
Man, I don't know what to do with that.
He said, look at the numbers.
This is a lot of swagger for a guy who last week said one of his companies was going to go bankrupt.
Oh,
he is. Man.
And if you want to talk about swagger, when he asked, "Is that why you have 6 kids?" he said, "Well, I try to set a good example."
That's a good line.
That's such a good line.
I mean, Japan's been dealing with this for years and years and years, a low birth rate, and they struggle with. I mean, it's a market economy. You have to have a market to operate. So it's, if your population is declining, I mean, I can see that argument from an economics perspective.
No,
whether he is right is another question altogether.
Yeah, I mean, man, there's so many holes in that argument. We don't have time.
Like I said, this could be an entirely different podcast, but separate podcast. But again, this is why I would encourage you to listen to it, because the other one, finally, we talk about Neuralink every once in a while, and that's where he's trying to connect the brain-computer interface. But he says that Neuralink will have the chance to restore full body functionality to people who have lost control of their limbs very soon. And I found that also very exciting.
This is the polarity when you're dealing with this guy because he's a genius.
Oh,
and if
man.
there's a guy who can do it, it may be him. I don't doubt his ability to do anything he sets his mind to. What he needs to do is focus on his actions because his words are horrible.
I don't know. Some of these words are pretty good. And it's, no, agreed. Like, overall, it's like any kind of analytical thinker or a lot of engineers that we talk about. They know what the right answer is, and they don't really seem like they need to explain it in any good, clear way for people to understand. And that's the vibe I get a lot when he's talking.
Yeah.
Again, man.
I'll borrow Anna's line here. If only he had somebody to help him formulate his messages, like a media or public relations. Oh, wait. He got rid of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He has Twitter. He has Twitter.
Twitter.
Oh, my goodness.
He sure does.
All right. Well, we spent enough time on that. So let's move on to our next most popular story. Thank you for entertaining that. It was just, as I'm watching it or listening to it, I'm just like, I can't believe he said that. Just taking All right. Next most popular story this week. Thieves use Apple tracking devices to steal cars. Earlier this year, Apple debuted AirTags, a Bluetooth-connected button-shaped tile that helps you keep track of things. Unfortunately, law enforcement in Toronto have reported car thieves using Apple's new tracking tiles to steal luxury vehicles. Thieves are placing the tags in hidden areas on high-end vehicles and when they're parked in public places. Then they trace the cars back to the owners' homes using their phones and then steal them right out of the driveway. Andy, I just figured, with new technology, we're always going to figure out new ways to use it for nefarious reasons.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's happening here. It will be interesting to see. This is a very kind of isolated case. There's no stats on whether this is happening in the broader economy, but in suburban Toronto, where we're talking about, there were, I believe, 5 cases that the local authorities have investigated. So that might be a little too small of a ripple in the pond for Apple to respond to, but I'm interested in whether they would consider limiting how AirTags could be used in somehow. Because in theory, you put them on your keys, your wallet, whatever you don't want to lose. But there's, getting your car stolen is bad enough, but there's any number of other easily imagined scenarios where this could go south.
Yeah.
Stalking cases, domestic violence cases.
I was going to say, put it on a kid.
Right.
Yeah.
So this, it's opening up another tech can of worms with some unintended consequences, it looks like.
Is part of this story that by reporting this, by sharing the story from the Toronto law enforcement, are we just giving criminals a new idea?
I don't think so because, I think this one gets a lot of attention because it's an Apple product.
Yeah.
I just did some quick Googling.
Yeah.
You can find a magnetic GPS tracker on Amazon for like $15.
You just checked that now?
I did. Honestly.
You didn't know that? No. We're going to sweep our cars. No.
Well, you can find one of those. I actually did an Amazon search for that too. The sweeper things, those are like $380.
Oh, see?
So there's solutions out there potentially.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with Andy. I'm with some of the comments on our sites as well. People basically saying this is not a technology issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's the application issue. And I would agree with that 100%. There was something interesting though, and I wasn't that familiar with AirTags. I kind of heard the name before, didn't exactly understand what they were till we did this story. But on Apple's site, they say that the AirTag is designed to discourage unwanted tracking. Okay. So if someone else's AirTags finds its way into your stuff, your phone will notice it's traveling with you and send you an alert.
Oh.
Okay, so that works if you have an iPhone.
Okay.
If you don't have one, though, it's also, if you happen to be with a friend who has an AirTag, these alerts are triggered only when the AirTag is separated from its owner. It'll actually emit an audible alert, the actual tag. So I wonder if these car thieves are doing something to actually manipulate the tag so that it doesn't allow anything to go to either somebody's iPhone or, give that audible alert.
So it would kind of chirp.
Exactly.
Okay, because
when
I'm
it's
thinking
separated from the owner.
Yeah.
And it's not yours. Because if it's yours, it knows who you are through your phone.
Yeah.
If it belongs to somebody else and it's on you, I accidentally grab your phone or something, it'll tell me you got David's phone.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
Is there is there anything, have you guys ever used any of these solutions? I've seen them a lot where people put them on keys, but I mean, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I could have used something to keep track of my items a little bit better. But there's just, I don't see a need for this. Do you guys see a big need for this type of tracking technology?
I've gotten along this far without losing my keys or my wallet, so no. But also, I'm rapidly approaching middle age, so maybe for somebody younger than me, it's a different response.
I have to admit, when I thought about this, and again, I hadn't thought about AirTags, but with my daughters getting their license and keys and stuff, and those fobs are expensive. I mean, it's $175 for a new fob, so maybe something like that
to protect the fob and not LoJack their cars.
Yeah. Yeah. Why would I load?
No,
wow, you are going dark today, man.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, it has to be so you don't lose your keys. But I mean, also, it's going to follow you wherever you go.
My kids are not like you in high school. Okay, I don't have these same worries.
That's what all good kids say. That's what we all say.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone else got in trouble, not me, because I ran the fastest. No.
Did you?
No. I just
the other thing. I wonder if, Andy, like Andy said, this has kind of been focused in this one geography right now. If this does get wider spread, what I would envision actually is the automakers putting in some sort of jamming technology almost. I mean, we have Wi-Fi in the vehicle right now. Yeah. And actually buying like Wi-Fi jammers is actually illegal. Oh. Because if you have one, you're traveling, you're screwing everybody up wherever you go. Yeah. But you would think they would, if this becomes a bigger issue, there would be the ability to block anything, I guess, transmitting from your vehicle. Yeah. So somebody couldn't pick up your Wi-Fi, and then ideally some of these signals.
recommend disabling the port that you use to wipe the key clean. So that's in addition to the club from the 90s, those commercials, that'll work too. Yeah. So sometimes low-tech stuff.
Yeah, they can still find your car. They just couldn't steal it.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things that I found interesting is that once they were locating the cars, they were also using whatever the device was that mechanics use to reprogram your car back to its factory settings. And I was just like, I mean, my knowledge of it is still, movies and TV where they like rip the panel out and they like
hot wire it.
Yeah, they grab two wires and it's like, oh, is that easy? Yeah. But I mean, they're getting much more sophisticated.
Is that what you're talking about where you go on Amazon and buy one of those for $400 or whatever? Or is that a different thing you're talking about? Yeah.
It would work on anything, like a room, car, whatever. It looked pretty cool. I mean, you kind of want to get one just to have it.
That's what struck. Like that's all the tag does is take a little bit of the legwork out. Really, the work is busting the car open and wiping the key. So, but apparently that's easier than I imagined too. So that's comforting.
Well, and I have to we mentioned briefly about like autonomous cars, but as cars become, basically just computers with wheels, that has to be something that they would detect almost like malware.
Yeah.
I mean, this is great for Toronto, but in my neighborhood, they're still keeping it pretty analog, where it's almost daily, where some guy's like, I was just warming up my car, and wouldn't you believe it? It's like, oh, it was stolen, like all the other cars in the neighborhood.
You left a running car unattended, right? It was stolen.
That's
a shock.
I like to think that I leave mine running, but with kids in it, so they'll think twice.
You just attacked my parenting, and then you throw that little nugget out there?
I have them air tagged.
So you're okay if they go missing because you can find them.
I'll find them.
Yeah, on your phone.
Oh, geez, I got a buzz. No. All right. Let's move on to our most popular story.
I really hope Carrie Manti has some comments to make on this live broadcast.
She's always got comments. All right.
Wow.
Good ones. Man, you guys automatically think the worst. I do love her. All right. Our top story this week. EV maker Lucid crashes after disclosing SEC subpoena. Lucid Group, a new EV startup, announced that it has been subpoenaed by the SEC over how it became publicly traded. As a result, shares of the company crashed, falling 18% and bringing down Tesla, Fisker, Rivian, and Nikola stock down with it. Lucid, formerly known as Churchill Capital, went public in July after combining with Ativa, a special purpose acquisition company, or SPAC, which are used as a shortcut to go public. Companies going the SPAC route often feel more licensed to highlight projections from big growth that they're expecting in the future, instead of, what they've actually proven. Before the hit, Lucid had a market capitalization of nearly $78 million. Andy, that puts it in company with GM and Ford. And that just seems ridiculous to me.
Every one of these EV startups that tries to go public, everyone is always chasing the next Tesla, so their values just skyrocket because it almost seems like it's easier to chase the unknown commodity than the known commodity, where Ford and GM are telling you, hey, we're building electric cars and we actually know how to build cars, but that's maybe not as interesting as getting in on the ground floor of these other companies. I also found it weird that a weird, rarely used shortcut that became very popular is now having some ramifications. It's so unusual to see that.
Yeah, particularly in the financial sector.
Correct.
Yeah. No, it was. Does it seem to you like there is going to be some sort of, and maybe not just with EVs, but I feel like this is a bubble forming?
I mean, almost for my thought is that there's more. It seems like there's more Nikolas out there than Teslas out there. For every, Tesla is one of however many. There's one. And they're looking for the next one, but there doesn't mean. So it's almost like there's a bubble with each of these. We had the same discussion with Rivian. They're now the second most valuable car company in the world. So, and we'll see. I mean, they haven't even started delivering cars yet. So we'll have to see what happens here. But some of these are bubbles. Maybe some of them work out. We'll just have to see.
I mean, we are going to have to see, but Jeff, I just don't understand how a company can go public with only forward-looking information and not the fact that at the time they hadn't, I don't think, delivered a car, and now I think they're at 42.
Yeah.
Not certain.
Yeah, and then that does kind of lead into what you were talking about. It was a bubble. The good thing is when it pops, it's kind of limited in terms of its impact. So these folks are investors. This isn't tied into, big 401k funds or anything else. These are private investors who are going out there on a little bit of a limb. And I think when you look at some of these companies here, the ones that were mentioned, Tesla, they're okay. Okay, I don't think we need to worry about Tesla's stock prices. Fisker, I don't really know where they're at. I don't think anybody's holding their breath there. Rivian has, Amazon behind it.
Backing,
they're going to be okay. And Nikola, well, I think the dirt is starting to get kicked on the coffin there, to be real honest. I don't see much coming out there. But as far as Lucid goes, I think this was sort of a knee-jerk reaction after all that stuff at Lordstown, where there were such heavy investment, and for good reason, right? There was so much optimism and so much stuff you wanted to work out there.
It had a
badly.
good pedigree.
That's a great voice.
Yeah.
What else do you use that one for?
I don't even know.
That was fantastic. It did. Everybody wanted to feel good about Lordstown, and they got, they lost a lot there. So I think this was a little knee-jerk. All in all, I think Lucid is going to be fine. It was the 2022 Motor Trend's Car of the Year, their Air, and that's an $180,000 sedan that we're talking about here. But it's got a 500-mile range on it. It's got a lot of great stuff going for it. I think Lucid, like you said, they're just starting to deliver cars. I think this is a little bit more of a hiccup than anything else. I saw today they just got another almost $2 billion in funding from another offering of future type stuff. So I'm not going to pretend to understand all the financial elements in that. But again, I think this was a little bit of leftover concern from some of those other areas. And I think Lucid going forward will be just fine.
But when it comes to valuations and projections, traditional IPOs highlight past performance. So, maybe if we went a little bit more the traditional route, we wouldn't have such, like you said, knee-jerk back and forth reactions. I mean, it's great that startups can all of a sudden have a huge value and a lot more cash on hand. We know that's what every startup needs, but I feel like I don't know. It's all a gamble, and I mean, it feels like the bigger the bet, the more fun it is. So whatever.
Well, and it's like Andy was saying. Everybody's looking for that next Tesla.
Yeah.
When it came out, I mean, it wasn't that long ago. We were writing about $1 million losses within the quarter, $100 million quarterly losses, and now it's through the roof. Okay, so everybody's looking for them. They're willing to. I think pre-Lordstown, they were willing to take some of that stuff as a normal investment. Now I think they're just a little bit more. They're scrutinizing it a little bit more carefully.
So, Andy, between Fisker, Rivian, Nikola, Lucid, and Lordstown, which one would you bet on?
I think it has to be Rivian at this point. Yeah, if they they don't have to worry about cash flow if they got Amazon behind them. So
Okay.
that's, I mean, when you're talking about starting a car company from scratch, you're talking about access to capital more than maybe any other industry. So
Okay.
that's what I would put my money on if I were, and I am not.
Well, well, and there has to be something to be said that like it doesn't necessarily have to be Tesla. You know, it could be a specialty or premium car maker without, and still make it without, you know, becoming the average sedan.
Well, like we've talked about some of those smaller vehicles, electric vehicles, you know, whether it's for campus use or whatever you want to say, there's a future there too.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to, in case you missed it, the stories that, you know, maybe weren't as popular on the website, but we still think stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. I'll start with mine this week. Mine, in case you missed it, is a robot designed to enforce social distancing. Fun. It's going to be a fun one. So,
Terminator.
yeah. More RoboCop? Okay. No. So researchers at the University of Maryland at College Park have created the CS robot, which stands for the Mobile COVID Surveillance Robot, which detects non-compliance and social distancing breaches. The autonomous robot locates groups of people and tells them to break it up with a stern message on the screen. I added the stern because I figure that's what it's going to take to get it done. The robot can also take thermal images and then send those to security and healthcare personnel. Now, in tests, this robot detected and addressed most breaches, but the researchers stressed that they need to refine the technology and, most importantly, see how the robots will impact people's behavior in crowds. How soon does this crowd get, or does this robot get trashed pretty much in any setting? Like, I mean, just, I could see it at a show at the Majestic, just like now separate. And just like, it's immediately like passed around and crowd surfed to the front where then it's sort of smashed, probably with a guitar.
I was going to say, because everybody loves tattletale technology. And then when you actually put like a form to that, I'm sure it'll go great.
Yeah.
Like everybody just embraced that wholeheartedly, right?
It's a small robot. Yes, it's just a little guy rolling around telling you you're 5'8" instead of 6 feet. I just can't imagine how quickly that thing gets kicked.
Yeah, it's basic. I mean, and if it is kind of a Roomba with like an iPad on, you know, so maybe they need a little industrial design into that thing. But either way, unless it's like on a track, that's immediately being picked up, either slammed in place or just slightly outside.
It needs like its own security, like a bigger robot.
Oh, it's gonna help!
Yeah,
they've got me again. Jeff, to your Terminator reference, it actually reminded me of RoboCop, the Ed 209, where they're testing it, and the guy's like, just pointed the gun at in a threatening manner, and it's like he's in non-compliance, and it did not go well for Mr. Kenny.
No, that was pretty graphic.
Brutally,
Yeah.
shot to death. But
So we're not going to arm these, right?
it's America.
Boy,
Yeah,
you're making friends today.
No, it's. I mean, it made me think of like the teacher with the ruler at the dance, where it's just like, all right now. But I mean, even in the test footage of this that they released, every student that this thing drove up to had the same look, like, oh god, this thing again. Just like, but they were volunteers. So even the volunteer test subjects were seemingly annoyed by this.
So how do you feel about it?
I'm on board. A useful tool. I just don't see it being, in reality, I don't see it being effective. We saw a lot of people developing similar type technology at the beginning of the pandemic, and everyone seemed to be on board with it, like especially with like Bluetooth tags, stuff like that, where it would not only let you know if you're too close, but also who you're around for contact tracing, stuff like that. I mean, maybe part of my response to this is coronavirus exhaustion, you know, and this seems like an easy pillow to punch.
Yeah.
But it also just seemed like a little unnecessary to me, and it could be, or not unnecessary, necessary but ineffective.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The public reaction to any of this type of like police bot, whatever you want to call it, is always so overwhelmingly negative.
Yeah.
I think it's not I don't think it's a bad thing to try to continue to develop, but
Yeah.
you really need to be careful where you roll this out, because you know.
Remember that hitchhiking robot that just got absolutely obliterated in Pennsylvania, I think? I mean, I can't imagine. I'd have to find, this is years ago now, but I mean, this is that on speed. I mean,
the UW Madison is either testing or using the drones that were being
The food delivery
the food
ones,
delivery
they're
ones.
everywhere.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I can't believe, like, as I drive down Park Street and see those, I can't believe more of those aren't either tampered with or destroyed. Because also there's swarms of them. They're
My
annoying.
suspicion is kids are nicer than we were.
Oh, that might be.
That's just my
No, I'd
suspicion.
agree.
I've
Plus,
just
like,
anecdotally.
Doesn't it seem like there's sort of a, you don't mess with somebody's food a little bit?
Yeah.
I guess. But if that food tells you to step back.
Different.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to Andy. What's your in case you missed it this week?
Mine involves zapping the ocean with
right.
electricity. So the National Academy of Sciences recommended that the federal government spend more than $1 billion over a decade to research how the ocean could potentially absorb more carbon. Because as much as governments or companies or whoever try to limit the amount of carbon we emit, the consensus, I believe, is that's not good enough. We're going to have to start taking carbon out of the air. And you can plant trees, of course, but one way that these researchers were looking at was the ocean. And they issued 6 recommendations and kind of ranked them based on expense and how difficult they would be, and kind of suggested an amount to spend over the next decade. So I just want to run through them because I think they're really interesting and probably won't work, but at least they're probably interesting. So the first one, the one they are most optimistic about, is electrical jolting, which would apparently make ocean water less acidic. And that's, it says here that water that's more alkaline can suck up more carbon. It would also, ocean acidification is also a problem for coral reefs, marine life, that sort of thing.
okay.
So that could help address that. So that's the one they're most optimistic about. It's also the highest cost.
Yeah.
And I suspect zapping water, which famously conducts electricity really, really well, which have some risks to it.
Yeah.
So
They want $350 million for that one.
they do. That's that gets the biggest piece of the pie. The other ones, they want to use minerals to accomplish the same thing, make it more alkaline, add nutrients to promote plant growth, seaweed farming, and then a couple other ones here. Ecosystem recovery, which I feel like that ship may have sailed, although I really like that idea. Look,
Well, no, it's realistic. Right?
mean-
yeah, I'd agree.
and
Besides, what are Mr. Blackshirt here? I mean, come on.
No. It was just, I completely agree with him. It was just like, well, all right.
my favorite one is the last one. Confidence that this is working is low, the risks high. It has the lowest amount of money behind it, recommended money behind it. They want to create artificial waves, like the wave pool at Noah's Ark or your other
What does
standard
that,
issue.
What does that do?
It's creates upwelling and downwelling to stimulate plankton growth.
Oh,
It says here.
Okay.
So just, you got to get more kids splashing in that water.
That's right, and that seems like maybe you could charge admission too.
Oh my goodness.
Some money pays for itself. Well done.
There you go.
So you said the electric jolting was the one that they're the most promising?
Yes, that's the one they want backed with the most funding.
Okay. And how do
It does say it is high risk,
Yeah. How do you
medium to high risk.
Yeah.
Oh, medium. Okay.
But like I
Depends how many
guess
people are in the water. I guess.
I guess
Yeah.
well, and not just people, but wildlife. So like I get it that if you jolt the water, you do jolt the wildlife. And if you only do it for a certain amount of time, you only stun the wildlife. But there has to be some sort of risk with that.
They say it'll work because it's just chemistry. I mean, if you
Yeah.
alter the water like that, but I can't imagine what kind of homework would need to be done to make sure you don't.
Well, it's actually kind of a common practice, though. Like with the DNR, you'll see them stun
they
lakes
shut, yeah.
and stuff like that. So greater scale, obviously, but
Yeah,
I mean,
the
kinda
ocean.
makes sense.
How do you
a
go
little
about
bit
that?
bigger.
Like, I mean, I just picture this guy with like a huge cord. He like lops off the side and just whips it in the ocean. Like,
He's out there on a rowboat with a cattle prod. Just
gonna restart her. I don't know. I mean, I feel like that's how it's gonna get done.
Perfect science to
It's
me.
a government employee. It's like we started with $350 million, and we wound up with a guy in a rowboat with a cattle prod. Sounds right. No, but I mean, if any of these were to actually work, so are these just at the R&D level right now? And this is like,
not even that. They're not saying we should do this. They're wondering if we can.
Oh, gotcha.
And then you answer that question later.
Okay.
Then some people are like, this is insane. But also, basically, this panel is saying it's best to be prepared because something has to be done here.
Well, I wonder if any of these technologies are something that like DARPA or a different branch of the government could get behind, where there might be a little bit more?
There is some question of how to fund this. There's some money in the infrastructure bill for climate change purposes, but I believe maybe squirreling that away in the Pentagon budget might be also a way to go about it if they could.
All right. The ship has sailed on the ecosystem.
Listen, I hate that as much as anybody else, but
Well, what do you always say, David?
Coral's not coming back.
Well, I've never heard you say that before, but can't have nice things.
Can't have nice things. They're 3D printing coral now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a start. One 3D printer at a time. All right. Jeff, what is your, in case you missed it?
Well, I'm going to try to go a little bit lighter, David. I'm sure you'll plunge this into the depths of disparity and the state of this planet. But did a story on Christmas cookies because I thought it was interesting to see the supply chain dynamics, how it's impacting everything, and how it's really kind of impacted different areas in different ways.
Okay.
So anyway, HelloFresh, so they're that prepared meal kit company. They put out a survey seeing what it would cost in different areas to produce 100 butter cookies for Christmas. Okay. The U.S. came in at about $6.10. And that encompasses 2 pounds of flour, a dozen eggs, butter, baking soda, and sugar. Okay.
Okay.
What was interesting is the U.S. is at $6.10. It's like twice that much in Sweden. And even like the Dominican Republic, New Zealand, and Russia, it was more expensive to make Christmas cookies than the U.S.
Okay.
The most expensive place here in the U.S. was San Diego, which is not a surprise. Everything is super expensive there. But in South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, $2.23 to make a batch of 100 Christmas cookies.
100 butter cookies.
So
Sounds like
I
a
thought
challenge.
it was kind of interesting. But the real pressing question is here. I'll start with you, Andy. What is your favorite Christmas cookie? If you had to pick one.
I just go with the. I'm not a huge Christmas cookie guy. I'll eat. You have the pie with Christmas dinner. That's more my scene.
That's right. You're the pie guy.
But there'll be there'll be a plate of cookies. I'll usually go for just the standard sugar cookie with the little
The frosting and stuff and the sprinkles?
I'll usually go with the sprinkles with either the red or the green crystals on there.
Gotcha.
I'm pretty basic. I feel like that's not a
Nothing wrong
surprise
with
to anybody here.
Nothing wrong with that.
I guess that's better than Mike Hockett on the Taste Test series. It's hard to disappoint me. What's your favorite Christmas cookie?
I love the like the peanut butter cookies with the Hershey Kiss in the middle. Those are
It's a strong
those
one.
are the best.
Yeah.
My wife does a great job. She makes a bunch of different stuff too. She makes these ones with like pecans in the middle. Good stuff.
My my wife just had their Christmas cookie exchange at work, so I'm really excited to tear into those. But my favorite is my grandmother used to make them. They're called pillows, and it's a little bit of a thin layer of sugar cookie with a Hershey's like square, or not square, but like rectangle, just one piece of a Hershey in there, and then you like flap over the other top of the sugar cookie, and then you put just a little bit of the green and red sugar crystals on top.
You're talking about like a Reese's ravioli type situation.
Similar, I would say. It's
Because
more of a,
I'm extremely down for that.
it's like but yeah, not Reese's. It's a Hershey's ravioli.
Hershey ravioli.
Yeah, Hershey ravioli. But I'm on board with where
Yeah,
you're
we
going.
can adjust
Yeah,
that
we
too.
can make these larger. No, I mean, but we really have to talk about the critical danger with the choking hazards with Christmas cookies, Jeff.
Attaboy. Way to drag us down.
I always find these supply chain analysis pieces to be interesting because I don't know. It's when I first saw this, I'm like, my goodness, the one thing we can't lose at Christmas is cookies. But I thought it was interesting to show the disparity in terms of like, I mean, when you say it's more expensive in San Diego and cheaper in South Carolina, I mean, if you look at where new factories are going, like they're not going into San Diego,
point.
they're going
That's a
into
great point.
South Carolina.
Well, even like in Charleston, $2.23 though. Like that's like a dozen eggs here.
True.
That's that was interesting.
Yeah, unless you're getting them from Hockett again, then they're $5.
But worth it.
Right. Oh yeah, they're
Front
delicious.
fresh eggs are great.
Delicious.
So, in case you missed it, I thought that was kind of interesting.
No, very interesting. All right. Well, before we get out of here, we always like to share our final thought. Andy, what's your final thought?
This I actually had in mind before you scheduled the cookie discussion for the end here. We had our first little container of Christmas cookies out here, so broke the seal on that for the year. And I didn't realize if you ever work in an office setting, you just get like weird stuff sent to you around the holidays. And I didn't realize how much I missed that last year when we were all working from home. So I was glad to, one, realize that, and two, eat some cookies.
I was so happy that the company that sent us the bouquet of the what is it, the fruit bouquet?
Oh, yeah.
The edible arrangement.
Yeah.
They had checked down to a chocolate covered pretzel this year, and I think that was a bold choice and the right choice.
It was risky, but really paid off. High risk, high reward.
Well received.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Should go home. Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
So tonight, I'm going to go to a high school production of a Jane Austen play. And I was never involved in theater, like in high school, was not my thing. Still probably not my thing, but I'm very proud of my daughters for being involved. And I've actually learned a lot in terms of how much is done. They're more like on the crew doing stuff backstage. It's a ton of work, and it's a great thing for them to pick up on and all that. But if I'm being honest, I'm definitely going to buy some beers before I go to just something for me to have as a reward when I get home for
when
sitting
you get home.
Yeah, not before. Not before.
Just like in the school parking lot, shotgun and beers, like, here we go, Jane Austen.
No, I wasn't going there.
Yeah.
Just as a reward for me when I do get home after 2 hours of Jane Austen play. But it made me think, like, has there been something you guys have gone to in support of a family member typically or whatever that you were just, it was rough? Like, you were not a big fan of? The worst I could do, and this isn't, like, I do not mind going to this play. This isn't terrible or anything. But I can definitely remember, like, going to see some movies and falling asleep in the movie theater because they were just so bad. And you basically went there because the person you were with really wanted to see this Reese Witherspoon movie or something, you know?
To that point, specifically about movies, there was one point early in my life when a family member started seeing somebody new, and we went to the budget movie theater, and everyone voted we wanted to go see Bad Boys. But the person who was new to the family suggested we go and see Gordy the Lovable Pig, which was like a Babe offshoot. And it was just like, my brothers and I like,
oh man,
nah, maybe we see Bad Boys. And I was like 12. So it was still like age inappropriate, but we had a chance. And let me just go ahead and not recommend Gordy the Pig to anybody. It's still like a running gag between my brothers and I, where it's just like, yeah, the movie's garbage, but it's no Gordy. And to your other point about the theater, I love everything about the theater. I grew up in the theater, and I have done a little bit of theater, like in a previous life, and I love everything about it and what it does for the community and the kind of people it raises. So your daughters are in good hands. Like,
so I'm doing that right.
You're
Even
doing
though
it
I'm
right.
not tagging them, and I would trust them to, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're doing that right. You got that one.
Thanks.
All right. Zal, how about you? Unexpected.
Nothing springs to mind, but I suspect I am the subject of one, either in the community concert bands I was in growing up, maybe when we were a little younger and didn't exactly have real great command of our instruments, or later some of the bands I was in. Those performances were a little rough too.
Yeah.
But everyone was very nice to me. My parents never said a word, anything. So,
Oh, you got another gig, huh?
yeah, you got a hobby. Nice job.
Well, very good. My final thought is just a shout out to Anna. We miss you this week. And, hope that everyone starts feeling better. And we'll see you again next week. All right. Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also do us a favor by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, if you want to reach any of us, you can reach us at Jeff, Andy, or David at IEN.com. All right. Thank you very much for joining us today. Oh, you can also subscribe to our newsletters, our daily and weekly newsletters. Make sure you get the podcast in your inbox first. For Jeff and Andy, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.